What's up everyone, Thralls of Metal back again. I am Shredlord, and I'm here to bring you another video where we sit down with some of our favorite metal bands, and I make a list of who I feel like the best lead guitar players are. Last time we did Megadeth. This time we have decided to dive into legendary death metal band, Death. So as you know, Chuck Schuldiner and Death laid the blueprint for many a metal band across the land before his untimely demise. Rest in peace, Chuck. But throughout that, he pretty much put out 7 solid fucking albums, and strangely enough, each album has a different lead guitar player. So we're going to go through each album here, and we'll talk about who the lead guitarist was. I'll tell you where I placed them in my list, 1 through 7, and then, you know, a little chat about that guy, a little chat about that fella. Well, first and foremost, we need to start out with the debut album. Now, this video, in comparison to the last video, is going to be different in the sense that when we did the Megadeth ranking, yes, Dave Mustaine plays some leads, but I didn't really add him in the list due to the fact that he's not the main lead player, and there was never a Megadeth album where he was the only guitar and lead player. So, with that being said, that's why in this list, Chuck is going to be on that list because number one, he probably plays the most Death guitar solos for Death, period, because obviously he's the writer and the creator of Death. So with that being said, the whole album Scream Bloody Gore is basically just him. So with that being said, I felt like he needed to be on this list. So I felt like I just needed to explain that to everyone at home so nobody gives me shit about, well, you left Dave Mustaine. There was a reason, and this is the reason. So, let's start. Scream Bloody Gore. That is the first Death album. That is the Death album where Chuck and Chuck alone rocks the mic, so to speak. He's actually rocking the 6 strings, baby, with his Marshall Solid State, which he might have been playing the Marshall Solid States. Probably not that early, but later on definitely was playing the Marshall Solid States. Anyway, I digress. But Scream Bloody Gore. Now, please nobody kill me. I put Chuck at number 6 out of 7. He is the master, the creator, the architect. When it comes to riffs and song composition, he is one of the absolute best to ever do it in the genre, even still 20, 30 years later. However, when it comes to Chuck's leads, they were always solid, they were always melodic, and they always fit the vibe of the song. Now, part of the reason that I decided that I wanted to place Chuck where he was is, despite having a very solid repertoire of licks and everything, Chuck was always a little limited as far as his technique went. If you're a guitar player, you might know what I'm talking about. So it's not that he ever did anything bad, but you could just see that there was a limitation to the technique or the speed or execution of some of the higher end shred guitar type kind of stuff. There was a limit or a cap to how far he could push the RPMs, and he never did anything, like I said, crazy or ugly or gross on any album, but he definitely had a wheelhouse, and he stuck within that wheelhouse, and he knocked it the hell out. Some of my favorite Chuck solos, the 3 that I mentioned here. For everybody else on this list, I just picked 1 solo, for the main reason that every other guitar player on this list is only on 1 album, and some people, like Bobby Koelble, who I'll get into later, only has 3 solos on Symbolic. So to try and do multiple ones, it just didn't make sense. Chuck being the man, and he's been there since day 1, I threw 3. I think 3 of my favorite leads that Chuck's ever done are going to be Crystal Mountain, the title track to Spiritual Healing, and Pull the Plug. Those are excellent examples of him composing a fast, aggressive, melodic solo, a lot of half steps, to give it a very evil, kind of exotic feel to it, and a lot of speed tremolo picking and things like that to really amp up the aggressiveness, and it worked well. But for reasons of him always grabbing some kind of guitar player that just seemed to be amazing for all his other albums, once again, I felt the need to put him where he is and take this much time to defend my stance on it, because I definitely don't want to piss anybody off, but I am being honest with myself and with you, so There it is. Well, let's move on. Now, Chuck decides to get himself a partner in crime and turns to old school death metal guitar player Rick Rozz. Rick is a solid gentleman. I'm not sure what he has done since death, but when he was in death, he did a very good job contributing and being that second guitar player. So I got to place Rick at 7 behind Chuck. And it's nothing against Rick. Rick seemed to be a nice counterbalance for Chuck's style. They seemed to work really well together, almost like a yin and a yang, because when it came to Chuck's solos, like I said, they were more traditional, melodic, a little shreddy. And when it came to Rick's style, he had more of a Kerry King vibe going to him. So what I mean by that is, instead of playing a more traditional solo at times, he's really going for that end of the world chaos feel on the guitar. And what I mean by that is crazy dive bombs, cranking on the whammy until the strings sound like they're going to pop off the fretboard. Just quick movements, not necessarily has to be in key. If you just keep moving it up a fret, you can call it chromatic. Things like that. So it was very wild and frantic and not so much the traditional lead. It kind of sounds like a bomb or a war's going off in the background, which once again was a good counterpart to what Chuck was doing. But when you're talking about lead guitar playing, there just wasn't much substance there. So that's why I kind of place Rick Rozz at number 7. Like Chuck does, he decides to change scenery and get somebody new in the mix. And in walks in my opinion, underground guitar hero who should be well more known than he is now. And that is Mr. James Murphy on the album Spiritual Healing. James takes 8 solos on the album Spiritual Healing, which are kick-ass. James is an extremely talented guitar player who has given his services to legendary bands such as Obituary, Death, Testament, Cancer, so on and so forth. And he is just a motherfucker of a player. He is an incredibly skilled, highly proficient shred aficionado who can just blaze all over the fretboard, and a good blazer. So sometimes you'll have guys who can just play a million miles an hour, but it doesn't really grab you. For me personally, I would think of somebody like Michelangelo Badio. I think he's an incredibly awesome guy. I think his technique is insane, but he can play me a million miles an hour and it doesn't really do anything. It doesn't move me. It doesn't grab me. James Murphy was a player who could burn a million miles an hour, but still was talented enough to create leads that were interesting and melodic and added something to the composition. And honestly, if he did not go through some of the illnesses that he has went through, some of you who are familiar with James know that he's battled a lot of illness throughout his life, which has definitely hampered his career. I truly feel like if James wasn't dealing with so many health issues that he had going on, he would be way more talked about and probably have been in way more projects. Like I said, he is one of those guys that really has it. He's still playing, but in his time with Death, he had it all together. He had the fire with the shred. He had the good grabbing parts. He knew when to hit the gas and he knew when to slow down a little bit. But all in all, it was always intense. And it was just a new gear that Death has not had up until this point. It was more of that sophisticated lead now, which once again, Chuck was a solid lead player, but James Murphy was an upper echelon type lead player, and they had never had that before. And to have that burner of a guitar player who could be that intense and add such great vibes and tension, and being able to add so much of that flavor to this album, really, in my mind, it's one of his best performances. Now, like a fart in the wind, James Murphy, of course, leaves, although James was known for playing with a lot of different people, so I don't even know if Chuck wanted a permanent member like that he would have stayed. He might have ended up doing other projects, who knows, but in typical Death fashion, Chuck, of course, recruits a new band. This time they put out the album Human with one of my favorite guitar players ever, Mr. Paul Masvidal of Cynic. And I put Paul at number 2. I think Paul is an incredible talent. I feel almost a kinship in a way to players like Paul because I was a kid that grew up very much into heavy metal. things like Ozzy Osbourne, Judas Priest, Black Sabbath. But then I was also the kid that when I went to high school, I was fortunate enough to go to an arts high school where I was able to study jazz. And I studied things like blues and jazz and fusion music. And that's a very similar background to what Paul Masvidal comes to. One of the reasons that I love Paul's playing is, to me, it's very reminiscent of a legendary fusion guitar player, Mr. Alan Holdsworth, who was a phenomenal talent. We just lost him maybe a few years ago, rest in peace. But Alan Holdsworth was the king of the left hand. A lot of people actually said that when he played leads, it was so smooth, it didn't sound like a guitar at times. It would sound like a saxophone with how fluid the notes would move across the fretboard. And that is something that Paul has in his playing. If you've ever listened to Cynic, you will hear those beautiful legato fluid runs, but not just typical fluid legato runs. He has that jazz and fusion background, so he's very intelligent when it comes to music theory, and he knows certain notes to accentuate and certain notes to use to really create different moods and feelings. And that level of sophistication, to me, is what makes Paul a special player, and it really is something that made Human a special album to me. Obviously, the solo I picked was Flattening of Emotions. Realistically, though, there's only 3 solos on this album that Paul plays, which is criminally underrated. However, if you want to hear Paul play leads, you can always listen to Cynic. But I just felt like in this discography, that was wasted talent. He could have added a couple more things to Human, I think, and it would have been awesome. Not that I would change anything about it, but to have someone as talented as him and not use him a little more is a crime. It's not as bad as Loomis and Arch Enemy, but it does recall in my brain. So, yeah, Paul is one of those dudes that is a special guy, and if you ever listen to Cynic or ever hear him play leads or watch him on YouTube and everything, you can just tell that he has a style that is his, but also draws from that old jazz and fusion style, and it is just a really cool, unique voice to hear, especially in death metal. Now, after Human, we know that Chuck does Chuck things. New lineup formed. However, this time, instead of getting a guitar player to add to the band, he taps a very famous metal guitar player in King Diamond's right-hand man, Andy LaRocque, for the album Individual Thought Patterns. My oh my. When it comes to Human or Individual Thought Patterns, it's like 1A, 1B to me. Those are my 2 favorite death albums. And needless to say, I put Andy LaRocque as my number 1 death guitar player. I think Andy LaRocque is an incredibly gifted guitar player that can play a blues rock solo if he needs to, like Michael Schenker, but then can sweep arpeggios like Yngwie Malmsteen. Everything about Andy LaRocque is total pro. He has amazing tone, his feeling and his phrasing. He's not just a shredder. He goes beyond the shredder moniker. He is somebody that can create very emotion-pulling solos and still maintain that high octave. If you don't believe me, listen to the solo Sleepless Nights by King Diamond, and if you don't think that guy is just disgustingly talented, then I don't know what the fuck you want out of guitar players, because that's a perfect solo. It's awesome. And another thing that makes Andy LaRocque so special to me is, just like Paul, kind of his understanding of music. He is very well versed in music theory, which allows him to use his knowledge to really craft some memorable leads and really add unique things to his leads that make them all his own. He really does have his own style. Really, in my opinion, and people can disagree with me, I'd be interested to know what you think. I really think that you can put somebody like Andy LaRocque into any version of death and he would just kill it. Once again, he's a total professional. I think you can throw him into any situation and he will find a way to be expressive and musical. I don't necessarily think he's better than Paul Masvidal. I think they have different styles, definitely. They come from 2 different worlds. But being that Andy is the more traditional hard rock heavy metal guy, I think it lent itself really well. My favorite solo that he does is Trapped in a Corner. That whole thing is a masterpiece. And not only will he play crazy shit, he'll double it, he'll triple it. He knows what he's doing. He's not just, making shit up and not know how to play it. So after that, Chuck, of course, gets a new lineup. And we get Bobby Koelble on lead guitar for the album Symbolic. Now, Symbolic is an excellent album. A lot of people who are Death fans Really love this album, myself included. I think it's a great album. And Bobby Koelble, I thought, was a damn good guitar player to add to this mix. Like Paul Masvidal, he comes from a more jazz fusion background. However, they have still different styles, whereas Paul Masvidal comes from the more Alan Holdsworth style of left-hand legato. I feel like Bobby Koelble was more of a bebop jazz guitar player, where he's swinging a lot of notes and using passing tones and things like that to really create some cool phrases. My favorite solo that he does on Symbolic is the title track. If you listen to that, there's actually a really cool video of Bobby playing all the solos from this album on YouTube. If you're a fan of guitar, you should definitely check it out. It's really cool, and you'll see what I mean when I say this. There are little nuances and little phrases that he does when you watch him play it that I don't know if you necessarily would notice just in hearing the song, but when you're watching it as a guitar player, I can see that he really just mapped out these phrases and changes and movements and everything, and it was very reminiscent of watching a jazz guitarist to me play metal, and I just thought that was cool as shit. Having that extra knowledge of music theory and things from jazz once again gave Bobby Koelble a really cool, little bit of a unique voice and added some really cool moments on his leads from Death's Symbolic. And last, but certainly not least, before Controlled Denied was a thing, we got the last Death album, which is a toss-up for some, because we know that the Sound of Perseverance, Death's last album, was actually supposed to be a Controlled Denied album and ended up being released under the moniker of Death. Some fans are crazy about it, some fans don't like it at all, some fans just say, yeah, it's pretty good. I enjoyed that album to a degree, but we get one final guitar player who would end up being the guitarist of Controlled Denied as well, and that is Mr. Shannon Hamm. Shannon, I put on my list as number 5 under Kobe, and the reason I did that is when I listen to Shannon's leads, he's once again a very talented. Everybody who's been in this band is pretty talented, but he is a solid shredder. He has good technique. He's able to play a lot of the standard shred runs, nice and smooth. It doesn't sound like he's laboring to do it. He's got good delivery, good phrasing. The thing that really struck me, though, as I was listening to it again, is Shannon's style almost sounds like he's trying to be Chuck, but with more technical proficiency in the execution. So like when I listen to a lot of Shannon's leads, like the one I chose here for Shannon would be Moment of Clarity on Sound of Perseverance. I think that is a fantastic solo, and you can kind of hear him doing some of these things where what Chuck would do, and what I mean by that is a lot of these ascending licks. He would just keep ascending and ascending and ascending, and it's a great way to build excitement, but it almost, once again, kind of sounded like doing a lot of things that Chuck would do, but with a little bit better technique. And that was kind of cool to hear to a degree, because it's almost like two sides of the same player in a way. And you might think I'm totally crazy, but I'd be interested to know if you guys feel the same way. As far as his leads go, you know, there weren't that many of them to begin with. So none of these guys really got to leave their mark per se. Being that you're only on one album, you know, you can't really leave too much of a legacy behind. However, I do feel like some performances stand out better than others, and that's kind of how I composed my list. First and foremost, everybody on this list is a great player. I have great respect for them. We just do rankings for fun, you know. I'm not saying, you know, someone's a piece of shit and this guy's the best. Just a fun way to kind of put things in perspective and start cool conversations. I would be totally interested in knowing what you guys think. Am I batshit crazy? Did I make any good points? You tell me. Please put your list down below. I would love to hear and see what you guys think. And please don't come from my head putting Chuck so low. It's nothing but love for Chuck, but I'm just rating this on leads and leads alone, so please have some mercy. So, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time, pretty much, yeah. Nick and John do this all the time, and I do this a lot of the time, so yeah, all the time. We now have this little button down here that you can hit and join. It's 99 cents. That is our main way to support the channel now. Our only member perk at the moment is doing a live stream, which we will do soon. We are due to do soon. We definitely need to do some kind of a live stream tribute to Ozzy Osbourne. Rest in peace. He just passed away today. And I feel the need to say rest in peace, because he is somebody that I think affected millions and millions and millions of metalheads such as myself. His importance on this genre cannot be overstated. His work with Black Sabbath is timeless, and he is one of the greatest frontmen and greatest people that you could imagine, man. I don't hear too many people saying anything bad about Ozzy. Some people like to rag on Sharon, such is life. But Ozzy was always a sweetheart, cared about everybody, and overall just a badass motherfucking OG of metal. So fly high, dude. I hope you and Randy are jamming again. And last but certainly not least, thank you guys. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to watch our silly content and watch us goofballs talk about one of our favorite things in life, which is heavy metal. Having you guys contribute, join, help build the community, it is so exciting, and it keeps giving us a reason to come back and doing it over and over and over again. So thank you so much. And with that, we will catch you later.